Well, it's kind of freaking nutty in here, pal.
Yeah, because I can't see out of this eye anymore.
Damn, mate.
Like 2 years.
2 years?
Yeah. My wife, yesterday we were watching a Steeler game, and I'm going like this, looking, because I could see shadows. Like, okay. I could see more than I normally could out of that eye. And she goes, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I said I can see, like, more shadows." I said, "I can actually see better than I normally can out of that eye."
Right.
And she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "What do you mean, what do I mean?" And she goes, "Can't you see out of that eye?" And I'm like, "No." I'm like, "That's why that eye drifts." I said,
"How long you been married?"
I'm like, "Really?" I'm like, and she goes, "How are you driving?" I said,
"Carefully."
I'm like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, I've been able to see out of my right eye." I said, "Where do I drive to?" I said, "I go to work." I said, I don't go more than like
that's great.
10 miles from here.
That's great, man. Dave, I appreciate you doing this, man.
Sure.
I don't even know where to begin. So there's like this long tapestry of crazy stuff that we've been involved with over the years. It's just it's absolutely nutty. You and I met, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, over a guitar purchase.
Yes.
When Boogie Street was in its infancy. I want to say it was 99-ish, maybe 2000, maybe something like that.
Yeah, it had to be roughly in that time frame.
And you bought a Paul Reed Smith, I believe.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing he doesn't have it anymore.
I don't have it anymore. And it's funny, the guitar, I believe it was a custom 24.
It was.
And
yes. Was it yellow amber?
It was, but I looked at the pictures. I thought it was red or like a root beer type of color. And then I got it.
You still bought it?
I still bought it, yeah, because it was, it was what I was looking for. And the colors on all of them back then were, they were, if it was a 10 top, it was.
Yeah, exactly.
If it was a 10 top, it was a 10 top. There was no disputing whether, they mislabeled it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So at the time, you were somewhat winding down Pittsburgh Pinball. Would that be about right? You're in the process of moving the operation to your location as opposed to having a retail space.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. It was, I had closed the retail location, and I was we were doing more of an internet-based sales thing because we were doing a lot of shipping and stuff at that point. So it really didn't make sense to have, I just wasn't getting like the walk-in traffic.
Yeah.
It just made more sense to.
So Pittsburgh Pinball, how did that start?
I started off as a pinball collector.
Okay.
Pinball machines and arcade games and stuff like that. Just stuff I remembered.
As a kid?
I remembered as a kid, yeah. Playing in the arcades and the fun and games and the boardwalks on vacation, all that kind of stuff.
Okay.
And then, I started collecting them. And from the places that were available to buy them locally, I just wasn't real happy with the experience, I guess we'll put it that way. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I can do this better. I can do this better as a hobby and probably start a business doing it.
And when was this approximately?
That would have been 97.
Okay.
Yeah, probably around 97.
Okay.
And 97, I went out and I found a location up on West Liberty Avenue in Dormont. And I believe my first wife at the time was out of town. And when she came home, I had leased a building that was going to house Pittsburgh Pinball and filled out all the paperwork with the state for, fictitious name and sales tax license and all the things you need to do in order to start a business.
Yes, so the hobby grew into a business.
Yes, that was kind of how that all started.
So when you decided to lease the space, do you remember how many games you had in your possession at that moment? Approximately.
Approximately, there were probably 16, 17 pinball machines that were currently sitting in my garage. that I had bought in order to refurbish and resell.
So were you doing the refurbishing yourself?
Yes. Yeah, just from it's kind of a trait that I had picked up from working on my own stuff. There weren't really a lot of, well, there wasn't really YouTube or any of that kind of stuff at the time. There was a lot of contacts I had made through the old news groups that used to be available on things.
When the web was young.
Yeah, when the web was young. Yeah, so a lot of news groups. There was a pinball.rec.grp or something like that where...
Now you're dating yourself.
Yeah, there was a lot of guys that would post useful knowledge on... you could put a question up there and they'd be like, oh, yeah, you need to, replace this diode on this board.
That's so cool, though.
Yeah, I mean, it was old school stuff. You would get the schematics out. I learned how to do some basic electrical wiring at the time and how to read a schematic and use a multimeter to determine whether the voltages were right. And
so would you say in 97 or so, pinballs had already seen their heyday because video games had first taken over. Yeah. So, but they were still rather plentiful. Somewhat plentiful.
There was still a lot out there. You would still see them in like bars and restaurants
100%.
And places like that. They were, half the lights were burnt out and, the one flipper wouldn't work. And, after you put your money in it, you'd be like, oh, this sucks because,
screwed.
You don't get the experience when most of the crap on it doesn't work. That was the thing I had to explain to a lot of customers when I started selling pinball machines that, look, you need to kind of be like a car mechanic if you're buying a pinball machine. It's not something you just buy and play and enjoy. It's something you have to maintain and work on.
Like if you're a vintage car collector, you should have an aptitude for car repair, I would think, right? Generally. Unless you're uber wealthy. But,
exactly, yeah. You are either going to have to know how to open the game up to change some light bulbs, maybe check a fuse, clean it off once in a while at the very least, or have someone available to you that knows how to do that. Because at some point it's going to break. You can't... If I sell you a game, don't call me in 3 years and go, you know what? Half these lights don't work. Yeah, they burn out.
Could you imagine trying to do this today with the expectations that Amazon has put on the consumer now? Of like immediacy and the free unanswered exchanges and all that nonsense. We couldn't have done what we did.
Yeah. Well, even keep in mind, we're talking back in the 90s, late 90s. Shipping a pinball machine, say from Pennsylvania to California, depending on the level of service you're looking at shipping costs back then of anywhere from $150 to, if you're getting kid glove care where someone's going to bring it in and set it up for you,
right.
It's like a $300 shipping charge. And even back then, people were like, "Oh, can you throw in free shipping?" No, no, I can. I can charge you exactly the discounted price we're getting charged. But yeah,
I remember that. Not a client telling me, "Can you throw in the shipping?" I said, "I could."
Yeah.
But I won't.
I won't. Yes. How about if I charge you the same price that I have to pay?
I won't
for the
mark
shipping?
it up on you.
Yeah.
Where would you find pinball machines in 97? Like, we're finding inventory. How'd that work out?
Initially, back then, people would buy vendors that would put them on location in places like that for business purposes. You would buy them. There was a distributor network throughout the country. So depending on what area of the country you were in, if you wanted a Bally or Williams game, they would tell you, okay, you need to buy it from this certain distributor, that's located in, Pennsylvania or in West Virginia or whatever, depending on where you physically were at. So initially I started off, there was a couple local distributors here. There was a Betson Distributing and Green Coin and even Cleveland Coin at one point had a location here in Pennsylvania. So, I could go there and see what was in their warehouse and buy the stuff, wholesale from them. And of course the stuff that's in their warehouse, it's stuff, most of it was, it was broke in some sort of manner. It needed gone over. You had to fix all the stuff that was broke. You hoped there wasn't anything too major that was broke. You could check them out before you bought it, so you had an rough idea what kind of garbage you were buying.
Right.
But that's initially where I would get them. And then just over time, I realized that overseas, a lot of the stuff had been exported over to Europe.
Mm-hmm. Well, on that thought, I remember you called me on the phone. This is like about 4 or 5 months into our friendship.
Yeah. And
you have a crazy question. What are you doing this weekend? And I go, I'm kind of stuck doing this. I had a family thing I had to do. I couldn't get out of. Like, okay, I was just asking because I want to know if you wanted to go to, I think it was Belgium. Yes. I'm going to get on a plane and go to Belgium, and I'm going to come back like 2 days from now. I'm like, wait, what?
It was a quick weekend trip.
So next thing I know, you're in Belgium, and you had this crazy experience of going into a castle, and like you were a little worried about getting abducted, and am I going to make it home? And he wants to drag me on a trip like that.
Yeah, that was great. It seemed like a great idea at the time. I grabbed my.
Am I right? Is that pretty accurate?
That's pretty accurate. It was, I made contact with some people over in Europe, and I had a list and pictures of all these games that were available, and they were in really nice shape. But I didn't want to just send them the money and hope they showed up. I figured, this is worth my time. To, get on a plane and go check out to make sure this is legit. Plus, I hadn't been to Belgium, so, why not? Got a passport, and, this was still in the late 90s before before 9/11 had occurred and all that stuff.
I think this was 2000, I think.
That's probably around right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I called another friend of mine. He's like, sure, I'll go. I said, hey, I'm paying for the tickets. And he goes, Belgium, like Brussels in Europe. And I'm like, yeah. And
this is before you didn't need a passport then.
Still needed a passport.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, had a passport. It said my other buddy. And then he's like, what do I need? I said, nothing. I'll get the tickets and hotel, and we'll be back like Sunday sometime. So we went. Now I throw some clothes in a duffel bag. I throw tools in a duffel bag, talking like box wrench, socket set, all this kind of stuff. Walk through security with all that stuff. They check it. They don't care. Keep going along. I said, pre 9/11. So
different world, man.
It was a very different world. The fact that, I could carry a whole duffel bag full of tools with me on board the airplane that I was stowing in the overhead. And we went over and made
some shady characters picked you up and drove you to its castle or some bullshit.
Is
that right?
Yeah.
I'm going on memory.
Yeah. We got picked up. We got to the airport and came through customs and all that stuff. And there's a guy standing there with a sign that says Bishop. We went with him. We get in this little freaking car, because there was a bunch of little cars over there. It's like a Chevette. So my buddy are in the back of this car, and we're driving. You're seeing castles. It looks like Transylvania. You fly into Brussels. It looks like Pittsburgh International. It doesn't look any different. And then all of a sudden it's cobblestone. It's cobblestone roads and big Gothic churches, and there's a bar and a Gothic church. It's like the European version of Carnegie.
Oh, right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, so we go over, we check in the hotel. Next guy picks us up. We go to this warehouse, and I meet these guys. Big burly guy wearing like a big fur coat and stuff, and
the Belgian mob.
He's speaking whatever he was speaking. I didn't know, and the guy's translating, and I'm like, okay, these look pretty good. He's like, all right, you have to help us. We got to break them down. They're coming tomorrow to load them into the container. I'm like, okay, I've broken down machines before, so, we helped them load them up.
So you ended up working?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Ended up working, loading them into the container with a forklift, all that kind of thing. And then, truck came, took the container off.
And this was in like a castle?
Yeah. Yeah. And then, they took off the stuff down to port. I think it was Antwerp was the closest port that they shipped out of.
Yeah.
And put on an ocean container and sent them back to New York, where they were then trucked up this way. It was.
How long did it take to get here?
I think they showed up. It was probably like 2 weeks after I was there.
Okay.
But the stuff that came in was in immaculate shape.
I remember you telling me that. Yeah.
Compared to the stuff that was here, like I I had a bunch of Addams Family pinball machines, and it was all stuff that were like high-end games here that everybody wanted.
Right.
And they were in the bars and stuff over there, but they were actually taken care of. So they
maybe not used as much?
They have play meters on them. So like the play counts were similar to what they would see here. They were actually higher than what you would see here. And I think it was just that the vendors that used them over there made sure they were constantly working, and all the stuff on them would work.
As opposed to in the States,
as opposed
bars
to here,
are all used.
Yeah, you don't make any money on a pinball machine if only one flipper's working, because someone will play it, and then the people that might want to play it are looking and they see, oh, it doesn't work. So it sits there and collects coats and cigarette butts and whatever else. But
I remember when you moved the business so Dave resided in a rather large house. It's probably the largest house I had ever seen in my life up to that point. And it was a massive, I think it was a 3-car garage, which is a very big garage. Yeah. But this garage was big, but when I came to see you, and it had been after the move had taken place, the garage was absolutely full of pinball machines. Mm-hmm. I could not believe that you jammed that much stuff in a garage. Yep. I'm sure your neighbors couldn't believe it either. But
they weren't real happy. There were some issues about, running a business from your home.
Well, yeah, man. And I think our commonality was I was kind of doing the same damn thing, mm-hmm. with just guitars and busting out of the seams of where I was and worried about the neighbors pointing me out. And a lot of similarities in regards to collectors markets, mm-hmm. and just a lot of different products naturally. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing how much work had to go into what you were doing, the complexity of each product and the parts and all that stuff, which mm-hmm. was way above my pay grade. I'm like, oh man, I'm glad guitar's got like 5 or 6 parts on it. I can handle that.
Yeah.
But this whole busting down on a Gorgar pinball machine and finding little bumpers, and it just seemed like an incredible amount of work to me.
It was a lot of work. It was unfortunately, that it kind of took away some of the fun from the hobby, because one of those things, if you're going to get into a business, it has to be something that you definitely enjoy, mm-hmm. but you don't want it to suck the joy out of that.
I know that
item.
Feeling.
Yeah, I mean, after spending all day working on the machines to get them ready and then shipping them and then taking them to the shipper and all that kind of stuff, coming home and having to work on my own stuff before I could play it wasn't such a great thing. Plus, I was working a full-time job at the same time.
Right.
So it was running the business with a couple employees, working a full-time job, and a little bit of a grind. It was a good thing I was much healthier and much younger.
Oh, right on.
Time. Yeah.
I remember those days.
Yeah, it was easy.
I think you brought up a big point though. Like that's the one thing that I didn't plan for, and that was that one of the things that I absolutely loved was music in general, but specifically mm-hmm. guitars.
Yeah,
I fell in love with the instrument, a couple years before I actually got in the business.
Yeah.
But I love that instrument so much. It was just meant to be. But after 5 or 7 years, 8 years of being in the business, I didn't want to touch my guitars at home. I didn't want to enjoy them for me. Yep. The joy was getting sucked out of it.
Yep.
And I get it.
Yeah, you just it becomes more of a chore than a level of enjoyment.
It reminds you of work.
Yeah, it's just like more work where you pick up that guitar and all of a sudden next thing you know you're doing scales because you're checking it to make sure the pickups are working and it's in tune.
I feel like I'm at work.
Or you're like, okay, I do that all the time on the stuff I work on.
100%.
Versus I just want to sit here and jam.
It got even it got visceral after a while for me. Like I just didn't even want to look at them. I didn't want to have any guitars at home because and then when life really started slamming me and I was living in the back of my office for a couple of years, I could not escape it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but I think that's a trap. I think when people are lucky enough to start a business where it is their hobby, that's a danger.
Absolutely.
You became your hobby because you love it.
Yeah.
Be careful not to let that work element just suck the joy out of it.
Right. And depending on what you're doing, I mean, some stuff is so labor intensive that
I don't know how you did it. Like that was amazing to me. I think you had a couple different guys coming and going too, helping here and there. And you were also holding down a full time, contracting, programming gig and everything else that was going on. And in your personal life too was as turbulent as mine was.
Yep.
So I remember that. But I just thought it was just absolutely so cool that there was such a cool collector's market for pinballs. And I realized that it could be lucrative, but man, that was just that was something. Yeah. Now you ultimately got out of the business because hard to find inventory, parts.
Well, it was,
or you just had enough.
Kind of all of the above, and the economy crashed.
Okay, so what would this be, like the late 2000s?
So it would have been
2007, something like that.
It was around 2000, around 2007, 2008 when the real estate
I remember.
bubble burst. Yeah. And, businesses were closing. People didn't have the money. The .com stuff had kind of the roof had burst off of that.
Oh, I know.
So a lot of people's extra income wasn't available for the pinball machines, was one of the biggest problems. And even prior to that, I had scaled things back. I was a kind of a one-man show by this point. I cut it back because it was too much with everything that was going on with personal life and working a full-time job, plus doing this, plus just trying to live, have a semblance of a life on top of constantly working this job or that job. I'd scaled back and, I kind of focused for a while. I was the largest Super Checks bubble hockey dealer in the country.
Wow.
For several years.
That I remember.
Yeah.
That I remember.
Yeah, and that was...
You sold a lot of bubble hockey machines.
I sold a ton.
Yeah.
There was one year, I think we moved probably about 160 bubble checks.
Wow.
Dome hockey games. And they weren't cheap. They were, I think retail on them back then was around $2,500.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was the same type of thing. I mean, that was kind of starting to run its course. And, the distributor that made them eventually decided that they were going to also sell direct. And instead of, selling direct at the same price we were selling them at retail, they decided to sell them at the same price as what our dealer cost was at the time. So it didn't really make sense for us, some of the other outlying dealers to even bother carrying them anymore.
Yeah, the dealers got squeezed.
Yeah.
And I think the economy started that process.
Yeah.
I mean, having done the guitar end too, I can remember when the economy started going south, it was like a double whammy. All this disposable income that my collectors had for the higher end pieces, they were worried about their 401ks and investments.
Yep.
The dollar, unfortunately, remained extremely strong overseas, which prohibited a lot of my international customers to buy because they couldn't get a good exchange rate.
Right.
All at one time. And then here, the manufacturers were getting tighter and actually considering going direct to the public because they thought the web could squeeze the dealers out.
Right. Right.
So it was kind of like the perfect storm of dysfunction for a while.
Yeah, that's pretty much what we described it as too.
Pretty much. So I remember the day you came and said, I think I am going to find another retail space and get into the comic book business. It made total sense to me. I'm probably one of the few people in your life that made complete sense. But I was like, we are in one of the worst economies in probably at least 2 decades, or at least 2 decades.
They
early 90s, right?
Yeah, they had even said it was equivalent to what was going on Depression era.
Yeah,
type of thing.
And I'm thinking you're going to start a retail business for collectibles.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that I didn't think you should. I just thought that takes some balls because
Yeah.
But and one thing about you that I always admire was there was never any bullshit with you. If you were going to do something,
I do it.
Yes, and see, I think that's where we connected on it. We just love to take action, do shit, and throwing caution to the wind sometimes. In the essence that, hey, if it doesn't work, I'll figure it out. Because I think that you have to. I don't think everyone's cut like that. You know, so when you find another human being that's kind of cut with that mentality,
Right.
So this guy's a risk taker. He's willing to take that chance and do it, figuring if it doesn't work out, he's confident he'll figure it out. He'll figure something else out.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that came from, what I learned during the Pittsburgh Pinball days. I learned, if anything, I learned from my first business that I had started what not to do. I mean, there was a lot of great times with Pittsburgh Pinball, but there was a lot of bad times. There was a lot of really, really bad decisions that were made.
I remember a couple of guys that came in to work some stuff for you.
Yeah. There was just some horrible decisions that I made during that time, and that definitely has made moving into other businesses as well as advising people. I've had a lot of people ask me things about, hey, I'm thinking about starting this business. Do you think I should do this and this and this? And I've been able to honestly tell them, my thoughts on that and give them some good advice based on mistakes I've made.
Yeah, and see, I think that's another area where we've always connected to is our willingness to share experiences humbly. Like I never had any problem at all, even as difficult as it was sometimes, revealing my mistakes if I thought there was going to be a benefit to someone else hearing it.
Sure.
And I think that's the right way to go about things.
Sure.
Not everybody does that, unfortunately. But
no.
I think it's actually rare, to be honest with you.
And it's worked out well for us because neither one of us would hesitate to tell the other, that's the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
But if we can justify it then
100%.
to each other, that's
100%.
And then it's kind of like, okay, I didn't see it that way, but that kind of makes sense.
That's what I think I came to you 5 or 6 months into you opening over there because I, never being a comic book fan, I mean, I love the movies and things, but I never collected the actual books. I didn't understand the market. I didn't understand the actual industry.
Sure.
So it would be naive for me to figure that, hey, well, I know that he shouldn't be doing this. I just knew I knew that on premise it sounded like a difficult thing, especially because of the era we were doing it in.
Right.
But man, when I came over 5 or 6 months, and there's like this whole, not even 5 or 6 months, I think it was 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
From the moment you opened, there was a store in the middle of all places, Sewickley, Pennsylvania. Probably the least likely spot one would initially think about a comic book store in. Mm-hmm. And you were there, and there was racks, and there was all these dealer arrangements, and there was inventory coming in, and the freaking place was full of customers.
Yeah.
I'm like, Dave, what the hell are you doing over here? And you go, I told you I was going to open up a store. I'm like, I thought you were thinking about opening a store. There's like a store here. And I'm like, well, yeah. I told you, and then I happened to find a space the next day, and I got it. And I was just like, holy shit.
Well, the funny part about that is,
fast.
Like, I had actually done research into doing that probably for about a year before I did. Like, it came to me one day where I'm like, boy, that would be really cool to do. What's involved in this? And then I, got some research and I found out, where the distributors are, what the costs are involved. And then I actually started asking a little more detailed questions at some of the comic shops I was buying, my stuff from, just to get an idea as to, is this really worth doing?
Okay.
Or is this going to be something that is going to be so overwhelmingly, so much work to make, nickels.
Got it.
And, I think at the time I came to you, I'm like, yeah, I think I could do this. And then, it was with, like, after I told you about it, I think it was like the next week, I was like an eye doctor appointment.
That was it.
Huh. This place has been vacant for a while. I bet I can get
in Sewickley.
In Sewickley, yeah. I'm like, I'll bet that I can maybe get a deal on it. And I had my brother-in-law come down, who's an architect, and had him come down and look at the place and said, here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to knock out that wall, and that wall, and just open the whole place up. I said, can I do that without the building falling down? And he looked,
especially because it wasn't his building.
And he looked and he goes, that's a pretty good idea. He goes, that'll really open it up and, you get a whole open floor plan.
Yeah, but it almost happened overnight. Like, I mean, you were in there quick.
Yeah, when I was ready to go, it's go time. I don't, if I make a decision or I say I'm going to do something, it's not like, I'm going to do this. I'd like to do it in 5 years.
Why do you think, though, in general, that seems to be the biggest sticking point with people that have entrepreneurship ideas? Is it just simply fear?
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, because if you're going to go all in on something, there's always that fear that, this is going to be a complete disaster. And I had those days. When I opened the store, I'm like, I don't know, is anybody going to come in? Are we going to have our local customers? Or are we going to get repeat customers? Where are these people going to come from? And I opened up in that area knowing that I was probably roughly 20 miles from most other stores. I was far enough away that I wasn't really getting into someone else's territory.
Okay.
If you know what I mean? Because,
okay.
I wasn't really looking to put someone else out of business or take away someone's business or anything like that. I was in an area where I didn't have a close local shop,
Right.
which was part of the reason I thought, this is probably a good place to do it, and it's something I'm interested in. At the time, I was driving 30 to 45 minutes to my closest comic shop to buy stuff from them.
Right. So that was 2009, correct?
Around 2009 is when I probably was telling you, hey, I think I'm going to do this, and lease was signed, and I was open 2010.
So do you remember what month that was?
It was in May.
May of 2010.
Yeah, it was probably, I probably had the leases signed by April. And I was probably in talks with the landlord by March. By the time I got the contractor in there to do what I needed to get done and our first shipments of, racking and all that type of stuff, that was showing up during May. And then it was actually in time for the Memorial Day parade.
I went to that, and I brought my camera. I remember filming that. And I was introduced to the Steel City Ghostbusters that day. And
let me think. That was actually...
Or the next year.
That was that year, but that would have been later that summer.
Labor Day.
During their Harvest Festival.
Okay.
Yeah, that's when I invited the Steel City Ghostbusters down.
But there was this massive, 3-story, Stay Puft Marshmallow Man there. I have the photos.
Yes,
I have the proof.
Oh, yeah. Yep. We had that. That was part of the deal of bringing them down, was having the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man
and I'm walking
planted in front of the store.
So I'm not real familiar with Sewickley, PA, so I'm trying to find a parking space. And this festival they're having, which is tons of people. So I parked blocks and blocks away. And I'm walking, and as I'm walking, I'm seeing up above the buildings this big white inflatable. I'm thinking, I couldn't tell what it was. And that's because I'm coming from behind.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird. I wonder what the hell they got that over there. And sure enough, I turn the corner, it's in front of your store. I'm thinking, you got to be shitting me. What a freaking... Of course Dave did that.
It attracted attention.
Of course Dave did that.
What makes more sense? It's middle of a festival. Let's put a 30-foot Marshmallow Man in front of the place and have Ghostbusters running around town. It's
that was just nuts.
A year later, they had their... They were having the Sewickley Soup Crawl, and I brought in Larry Thomas, the soup Nazi from Seinfeld, as a guest at the store.
I cannot tell you how many people over the years have told me that when Seinfeld invariably comes up in conversation, they said, I think it was the early 2010s. There was a thing over in Sewickley, and I went over and talked about the soup Nazi. I'm like, listen, my friend actually was the one who coordinated that and brought the soup Nazi in. I mean, multiple people have randomly just told me they were hanging out with the soup Nazi in the early 2010s in Sewickley.
Yep.
And I'm like, oh, God, of course Dave did that.
Good times. Good times.
But it had nothing to do with comic books, but it made all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just the way you think about promotion, it made all the sense in the world.
Yeah, well, that's funny because, there's a line of thought on promotion that, it always has to be something specific to what your business is. But, if you're trying to bring in new customers, sometimes you just got to think out of the box a little bit. It's if there's something popular.
Yeah.
And then, that can draw people into the store and, suddenly they're like, oh, check this out. I didn't know this existed. This is awesome. This is cool.
Exactly right.
That's why we do the wine walk. Mm-hmm. We're not a wine store. But a friend of mine that worked at one of the country clubs, he comes down in his tux, pours wine for the for the women and men that, come out on the wine walk, we have a great time that night. It's not really lucrative that night for sales, to be honest with you, but I see a lot of those people back. It's leading up to Christmas
It's
time.
branding and relationships, right?
Yeah. People remember. They're like,
of course.
I was in that shop and they had those Ghostbuster proton packs for sale sitting on the shelf, and there was a Darth Vader mask, and and they have all these comic books. Did you know comic books can be worth thousands of dollars? And it's funny.
So would you say part of the experience is kind of educating the general public about what the whole market is?
Absolutely. It's kind of a weird misnomer, but a lot of people are like, oh, you must get a lot of people in because of all the movies. It's not really the case. It's some people may recognize some of the stuff on the shelves because of the movies.
Okay.
But the movies don't really drive anyone to go, you know what, I'm going to start buying Avengers comic books.
Okay.
I like the movie. Maybe, they may check them out, but, it's weird that doesn't really drive any big influx in sales.
So what about some of the other collectibles, like the figurines, just trinkets, movie trinkets? Does that stuff drive it?
That does, yeah. Yeah, there's we sell the Hot Toys 6-scale collectible figures, which, I primarily, they're involved. They make highly detailed figures in Japan.
Okay.
For several different genres, and I'll pretty much stick with like any of the Marvel, DC, or Star Wars figures they do.
Okay.
They do these crazy, they're 12-inch figures.
Yeah.
Highly detailed, lots of accessories, and with like the face sculpts that they do on them, it looks, it's splitting image of like whoever the actor was that played that person.
All I know is in 2010 or so, I was in there, and you had this figurine of this woman. I just got fixated on this figurine. I just couldn't get it out of my head. I don't know if it wasn't Supergirl. It was she was in a red, very form-fitting outfit. She was blonde. I just can't remember what it was now, but my God, I kept coming back.
Probably Power Girl.
Power Girl. It was Power Girl.
Power Girl is a very popular figure.
I made it certainly was captivating.
Yes. She's known for, there's a cutout that is at the top of her shirt known as the Power Girl window.
Power Girl. Yes, the Power Girl.
Yes.
What if you had to trace back in your past, going back to when you were young, was there a moment in time that might have planted the seed of you wanting to do entrepreneurship?
Probably a lot of that probably goes back to my dad. My dad, growing up, my dad worked for United Airlines. He worked for them. He worked with their ramp service department here in Pittsburgh, was with them probably 40 years, probably from the time he got the job until he retired. But during that time, he also owned a landscaping company, which, it started off, it was probably him and a buddy of his with a pickup and a couple mowers. And, by the time I was 9, he had the biggest landscaping company in the South Hills. Ron Bishop Lawn Service trucks were all over the place. We did a lot of the borough parks and recreational facilities and things like that. I started working for my dad back when I was 9. It was kind of one of those things like, oh, you want this, Atari system video game thing? I'm like, he goes, well, how about this? We'll put you to work. He goes, you can come out and give us a hand and, pick up these sticks and this garbage in these parks that we got to cut the grass at. And, I'll pay you, we'll give you $2 an hour. Sounds great.
I remember those
days. I'm like,
it's
if I work X amount of hours, I'll be able to go buy that Atari game. That's kind of how it started. But, my dad, you don't realize these things when you're a kid. But,
right.
He worked his butt off so we could do whatever we wanted.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't realize it at the time, but, all those years of working at United allowed us to travel to some great places on vacation. Plus, he had the landscaping company. A lot of
work.
Yeah, if we lived in a nice house and had things, we went camping on the weekends, and there's a lot of stuff we did, and it's, it goes back to working 2 jobs all that time, and it was pretty rough. He about a year after he retired, he passed away out of the blue. And that was rough because I was finally at the age where you could say I grew up.
Right.
I was kind of at the age where suddenly you start to realize real life stuff and what kind of commitment it takes to do things, and him and I were just. It was like a lot of time growing up. My dad was my boss, because he wasn't around a lot, but it was because he was constantly working, so we could do whatever we wanted, and it wasn't until shortly before he died where him and I just kind of started to be friends and really get to know each other again.
Yeah. Did that change your philosophy about life at all? Seeing someone pass so soon after retirement?
Yes. It was kind of eye-opening that, he was just getting to the point where, he was able to enjoy all the work and stuff he had done. He was going to NASCAR races. And, they had bought a place in Florida. When he retired, he was going to, get down to Sarasota, Florida, which is where my mom's at now. And, unfortunately, around the time he died, I had also already started to have some health issues. In 2002, I went down to the Sewickley emergency room one night. I had my soon-to-be wife, Beth. She took me down. I thought I had pneumonia, and here I was in congestive heart failure. And shortly after, while they were checking me in, next thing I know, I'm laying in the ER, and they're telling me and her that, hey, you need to call whoever it is you need to call. We don't know if he's going to make it. And that was the first meeting of my parents and her parents.
I remember.
I remember. I know you got the call.
I was in San Diego from Chris. I think.
Yep, you got the call from Chris.
Yep,
and
I remember it distinctly.
Said, hey, we don't know. Yeah, it was bad. It was. That was rough. I remember going in there, and like I said, I couldn't breathe. Felt like I just had. They said I had 16 pounds of fluid in my lungs. My pulse ox thing when they checked was down below 50.
Yeah.
It was bad. I remember the nurse telling me, she goes, I don't think you understand, the condition you're in. She goes, you're in pretty bad shape. And I remember,
she said that to you?
That's what the nurse said to me.
Holy crow.
And my response to her was, well, I'm not a doctor, but I get it. I might die. I completely get it.
It's terrible to say that to him. That's crazy.
I'm like, there's not much I can do about that right now. That's your job. I said,
so much for bedside manner.
I'm just trying not to die here
oh my God.
In the ER. Yeah, that's how that night went. And, but that night came down to one thing. And it's served me well over a long period of time, is that when things are just going nuts, like, you just need to breathe. I mean, and that night, that's all I did, was I concentrated laying there on breathing. I remember looking at the pulse ox thing, and I saw that every time I took a big breath, the pulse oxygen would go up a little higher. And they're like, oh, if it goes below, I forget what number they said, but we're going to have to put you on a respirator. And I'm like, I remember thinking to myself, they put me on a respirator, I'm not going to make it.
Wow, okay. I never heard that.
Yeah, that's...
So you actually concentrate on your breathing.
Yes, yeah, that's...
And here he is 20-some years ago, 22 years later.
Survived that, yeah, it was...
that was 20 years ago, Dave.
It was 20 years ago.
Wow.
Congestive heart failure.
Yeah, I remember getting the phone call, and Chris was there, and he felt completely helpless, and I'm like on the other side of the country. I'm like, you got to be kidding me.
Well, there was nothing anybody could do. We had no indications prior.
Yeah.
You know, I'd been sick with the flu, but
This was if I'm not
everybody had the flu.
I'm
You know?
so you and Beth, I think, got married in 2003.
Yes.
Because I remember I was also scheduled to go out of town that weekend too.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember coming and seeing you beforehand that
Right.
morning.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember leaving your house. I remember this distinct thought, like, wow, like 8-9 months ago, he was like on the verge of like not making it.
Yeah.
And now you guys are getting freaking married. I mean,
Yeah.
But then again, it's like, it always seemed like Jim Stewart, my other good friends, he coined the phrase Iron Man. Every time he would see Dave, he's just Iron Man, because you cannot, he's always going to be here. You can't get him down. And you just kept, every time you would have a health struggle, you just kept pushing along.
Yeah.
Every single time.
I have survived a lot. There was...
Yeah, no doubt.
I've been diabetic since I was 10, so I'm 53 now. So for 43 years, I've been diabetic. But so in 2002, I would have been, I was...
33?
Yeah, it was probably, it was in January. So it would have been 32 going on 33, and had the congestive heart failure, and that began... that kind of kicked off. My kidneys were starting to fail at that point. By 2008, I'd been in kidney failure and ended up, I had a kidney transplant, which saved my life back then.
Mm-hmm.
And it was actually the kidney transplant that kind of kicked me into, okay, I'm back on my feet. I want to do something I enjoy, which is kind of what led me towards the comic book stuff at that time.
Okay.
And then, after the kidney transplant, things were kind of cool for a while. And then, next thing I know, it was my 49th birthday. Mm-hmm. And we were going to have a big party that day. And, I was sick all night. And, next day I said, man, I think I have a gallstone or something. I said, I need to get something to help me keep my meds down for, all that stuff. And went up. And next thing I know, my 49th birthday, I'm sitting in the hospital room in the ER, and they're going, well, yeah, you got a gallstone, but, we were looking at your scans, and we're pretty sure you have cancer. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, are you fucking kidding me?
It's my birthday.
I'm like, and that's what I told the doctor. I'm like, really? On my birthday, you're telling me I have cancer? And, and I thought back to, I remember my dad dying, and I remember thinking, he just died out of the blue, heart attack. Yeah. I'm like, I've had all these symptoms and gone through all this crap prior to this. Yeah. I'm like, I am never, at that point I wasn't even 40 yet. I'm like, I'm never going to see 50. And then, just to be told at my 49th birthday that I had cancer was just a giant kick in the balls.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean,
no doubt.
But
here we are.
Here we are again. Yeah.
2000.
Another thing, couple
22.
A couple months, and I went through. I went down. Fortunately, I'm in one of the best cities in the world for cancer treatment.
No doubt.
Went to see the doctors down at Hillman, and we had a really hard conversation with Dr. Farah down there, who's one of the best. And after they confirmed the type that I had, I asked him straight up, what am I looking at? And he said, without successful treatment, he goes, you're not going to last 6 months. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's, a lot of people didn't know that part, but that's 6 months is what I was told. So we started the first treatment that they had thought would be the best course. And after about 6 weeks, it failed. It did not get me where I wanted to be. Thanksgiving was coming up. I had asked most of my family to be there for Thanksgiving because in my head, it was my last supper. I didn't, all the stuff that had been stacked against me at that point, I wasn't real hopeful that I was going to make it past Christmas. And, fortunately, after I saw Dr. Farah, he said, okay, the first round didn't really cut it. He goes, we're going to ramp it up a little bit here. He goes, we're going to bring in the big guns. And And he said, okay, we're going to start you. We're going to get we do spinal tap, and we're going to install a chemo port. And I'm like, oh, here we go. And I said, okay, well, when do we start that? In about a week or so? And he goes, no, you need to come down tomorrow. He goes, at 10 o'clock, we're going to do the spinal tap, and then we're just going to wheel you from there into the operating room and do the chemo port. And then tomorrow we're going to start chemo. I was like, okay. Here we go. So, so we started the chemo, and they that did a number on me. I ended up with, it got rid of the cancer, thank God. That's why I'm still here today. But it did some damage to, I have some heart damage, and it caused some damage to the kidneys. So, we're still dealing with that kind of stuff. But, knock on wood, fortunately, that second round of chemo, knocked the cancer out, and I've been in remission now for about 2 years.
Yes, indeed, my friend.
2 years. I'm at the point where, my last visit, they stretched out my appointments a little further. I'm on a 9-month rotation now instead of 3.
Thing.
Yeah. So it's been a good thing, but unfortunately, it's kind of weird. But the whole, the Iron Man thing and surviving all this stuff, and it's definitely taken a huge toll. I mean,
how could it not?
I'm tired.
Yeah.
I
we're getting old too, pal.
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
I have a few years on you.
Yeah,
Not many.
Yeah.
Not many.
I get pretty run down, but I'm still out there doing what I like to do, try to do as much as I can enjoy. But, a lot of people close to me, I know when something happens, they always think, oh, he'll be fine. He gets through it all. And it sometimes it just makes it really hard.
Certainly.
Because
certainly
it's almost like people just expect the stuff to go away.
Yeah. Well, you've been so perseverant.
Right.
Is that a word? To this point,
Right.
So it's like you almost get the expectation anything Dave, encounters, he's just going to kill it and move on.
He'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's
exactly.
Dave. It's Dave. He'll
That's
be
exactly.
fine.
I can't tell you how many times I've said that. Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
It doesn't lighten the load any.
It does not, and that's I don't show it, but it's.
How could it not, Dave?
Yeah, that's one of the ongoing kind of funny jokes I have with one of my doctors. He'll give me that. Oh well, are you depressed? Which I always look at him and go, you're looking at my file. My file is this big. I'm like, shouldn't I be depressed? And he goes, oh yeah. He goes, you got a point there. And he's like, well, is it overbearing? I'm like, no, I know I'm messed up. I still get up out of bed every day, and
right.
I do what I can do. I said, if I need to take a break, I take a break.
Right.
I said, it's not that freaking complicated, but yeah, it sucks.
So, if you were going to give some advice,
yes,
some very, maybe even esoteric, I don't mean some nuts and bolts accounting or legal advice, but just some general advice to new entrepreneurs. What are some of the best nuggets that you have based on your experiences? The most important things.
The most important things?
Lessons that you've learned.
It has to be something that you're truly invested in doing.
Okay.
Like doing something that you think, oh, I can do this. This is a way I can make a lot of money. If it's not something that you're truly have some kind of personal interest in, I mean, and it doesn't have to be something you love or a hobby you want to do, but you have to be committed enough to whatever it is to do it well. And realize that going in, it's not going to make you $1 million, maybe ever. At the very least, not right off the bat. I've gone into any business I've started knowing I'm probably not going to make a penny. I'm probably going to be losing money on a good guess the first several months that the thing is going. That's one of the things that you have to realize that there's that risk there. You don't go from a full-time job where you collect a paycheck every day and someone else is worrying about that stuff, to suddenly being the person and not having to worry about all that stuff that your prior job worried about and took care of. Yeah.
Would you think too that there's more misinformation out there now because of social media, creating an illusion of easy entrepreneurship? Do you think that's a thing?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I get emails and like video links all the time of, this is how you can start your business and you can be a millionaire right off the bat. It's not going to cost you anything more than your entry fee of $6,000. I mean, or whatever. But you get the typical. It's not an easy drive. It's not something that overnight you just go, I'm going to do this and I'm going to make $1 million. I'm never going to lose a night of sleep. I'm not going to worry about if I'm going to have money for food or rent, or it's just not how it is. There's nothing that's like that. I mean, you can have a full-time job working for, the longest running company in the world. There's always a chance that suddenly it's not going to be there.
Yes. I think employment gives a false sense of security.
Yeah, absolutely. There's not any job out there that someone can't lose. And there's not any job out there that you can't be replaced at. Mm-hmm. I mean...
Did you learn that lesson young?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had a job during one of the computer programming jobs I had. I was working for a company making really great money, and, I thought I was much more than I was.
Interesting.
And, I said stuff that other employees wish they would have said, but, it was stuff that, it was just wrong. I made mistakes. I was a loudmouth, outspoken person about stuff that, honestly, it wasn't my place to say. Mm-hmm. And the fact that I was with that company as long as I was before I was basically asked to leave, amazes me today. I wouldn't have put up with me today.
Were you unmanageable? Is that how ultimately you ended up in entrepreneurship?
No, I don't think that was the case. Although maybe that's my ego that has driven me to entrepreneurship. I mean, I've worked as a member of teams quite successfully for many things. So I think I can be a valid team member and not necessarily have to be in charge.
It probably wasn't your first preference, though.
I don't know. I tend to think that, maybe I went more towards entrepreneurship after working at several places and thinking, if I was in charge, I could do it better.
You don't say.
Yes.
I concur.
Yes. Maybe that's just something that all of us have. And, some people are content just being, a member of the team. And that's, there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. There's a lot less stress involved in that, I would say at times. But, I'm not cut that way. I have always been kind of okay, if we need to do something, let's do it. Let's get it done. Let's not sit around and talk about it for 18 months and not accomplish anything.
Right.
If the garage needs painted, let's get it painted. Go buy the paint and paint the wall, which isn't what happened with my garage, but sort of along those ways.
I think there's a, this is just one man's opinion.
Sure.
But I think with entrepreneurs in general, whether they're somebody running, a small pizza shop all the way up to Elon Musk, you put those people in the same room, there's similarities. I think a spark is in there that is just something different. I just think there's something different, whether it's a pushback against maybe authority or being told what to do, or maybe the lure of unlimited income, or more than standard income, the opportunity to be paid based upon your own efforts beyond a formal structure of a corporation. I think there's just that one. Okay. Now, and I think the spark is probably different in everybody, but there's got to be some similarities. I think entrepreneurs are wired differently.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, there's always that. I guess like I said, sometimes you just look at stuff and go, I could do this better. This doesn't make any sense to do it this way, but yet we keep doing it this way.
Is that what you said when you started Pittsburgh Pinball? Was the spark, that's the opportunity, or that's the location I have to acquire pinballs potentially for my hobby, and I see that I can do that better. Was that the main thing for you? Absolutely.
Yeah, that was definitely part of it. Yeah, I had a bad experience with another person I'd been buying from, and it was basically, fuck you, I can do this better.
Yeah.
And I did for quite some time.
Yeah, no doubt. I had some of that too. My thing was I found this cool new hobby called playing the guitar, and I bought a couple online pricey pieces that I quickly realized weren't for me, and I had to get them returned and out of the house before my wife would get the bill at the time. That's kind of why. And then I put it on that eBay thing, and it worked. So maybe that was the push. But I remember buying one or two of those guitars locally. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of places here in Pittsburgh you can do that, so I don't want to out anybody. But my experience was rather poor. And I said, if I know anything, I know it's customer service. I do know customer service, and I didn't get any there.
Yep.
I wonder what the markup is on this stuff. And then that precipitated me kind of diving in a little more and finding out, can I do this online? Because I just made all this. I just wanted to make my money back on these guitars, but they went considerably over the asking price on this eBay thing. There's a commerce element, and I thought the customer service stunk.
Right.
My experience was bad. Can I create a better experience for the customer and be savvy about it on this interwebs thing? Mm-hmm. And is there so for me, it was about the customer experience thing. Like, that was the driving thing. Like, I would never treat a customer as bad as I was treated,
Yep.
Like, but they're getting away with it because they figure there's not a lot of options for people to go.
And that's exactly the experience I had too. It was the same type of thing. And, it's funny that you bring that up. I never really thought about it, but, as well as I know about you, you have always gone the extra mile to make sure the customer was satisfied.
Yeah.
I mean, even at the early days of us being friends, I remember when we filmed the Boogie Street DVD that was going out.
Absolutely. The very first one.
Yeah.
2004.
I mean, that was one of the first things I brought up, and it ended up being the opening sequence of your thing.
It was. I got to go back and watch that.
I heard it on your it was the opening on your website every time.
It was.
I go to your website, and I hear my voice every time. After a while, it got a little old, but just because I'm like...
It was all, the recording was rather primitive, but it worked. It got the message across.
Yeah, but the customer service aspect, and you as well as I have both done things in the businesses we've been involved in where, I've definitely gone the extra mile to make sure a customer was happy on things to the point of,
because you understood it pays you back in the end. Even if you initially take a hit, and see, Dave, so let's talk about that. So that's where I think. That's where I think maybe it all kind of goes. I believe you and I understood the fact that the reward is not immediate. It's out there.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
And I'm willing to take the risk to do it, but we were willing to take our hits early on.
Sure.
Because we could see the bigger picture. And I think that is required for most successful entrepreneurs, but I think it's harder for a younger person to get past the bullshit now to kind of create that longer view. I think everybody's kind of geared toward immediacy because our whole world's full of immediacy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
It just takes a longer view, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and like I said, I've gone the extra mile to make sure customers are taken care of. But back in the several years ago with Big Bang Comics, I had a customer that we were holding books for. That's kind of how a comic book store works. A lot of your regulars will come in and they say, hey, I want, Batman and Spider-Man and whatever titles. And you say, okay. And you keep a list for them. And then as those books come out, so they don't have to stop in every week and risk missing something,
right,
you set them aside and hold them for them. So I had a customer that, younger generation, we held the stuff for them. After about 2 months, we still were holding stuff for them. I had called after a month. That was kind of our policy. If you haven't picked up within a month, we'll give you a call to remind you. Oh, yeah, well, I'm having some health issues, and, can you hold them for a while? He goes, I'll definitely be in to pick them up. Sure. I mean, I am fully aware of what happens when you have health issues. There's other bills to pay, and life goes on. I get it.
100%.
If anyone's going to get it, it's me on that aspect.
No doubt.
And, so it went on for another month, and we got to 2 months. And I called again, and I said, hey, any chance you might be able to pick some of this stuff up? Because we pay everything for it the week that we get it in. So, someone hasn't picked their stuff up for 2 months. It's essentially like if you didn't pay your electric bill for 2 months. We get to 2 months and the stuff's there. And they just kind of threw a hissy fit about the whole thing. And next thing I know, I'm seeing all these negative reviews popping up. I was like, what the heck? I've been seeing reviews about how, these guys, a great shop, but if you're running behind on your stuff, they will hassle you through emails and all this other stuff. And I was like, really? I'm like, where's the button that I can put out there that says, hey, this person didn't pay their bill for 2 months. Mm-hmm. I was just calling to find out when they were going to. And this, that's how things go, because, the immediacy.
Yeah, it's a different, playing field. And I have not been in retail for, my gosh, 8 years. I'm thinking about maybe entering in that in some capacity here shortly.
Yeah.
But again, in some capacity, but I'm aware that it's a different market now. What a client expects or what the public expects now in terms of service or what they perceive service to be is probably changed.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, back in the day when you were selling guitars and I was selling pinball machines and some other assorted things that I'd sold, on the internet, you and I, just because of how we were wired at the time, if someone paid, we shipped immediately. Mm-hmm. That's how we did it. It's not how everybody did it at the time.
Oh, no.
Some people would tell you, it should be out within a week or so, and then we'll send you a tracking
we
number.
never floated money, especially we never played with other people's money.
If someone paid for it, the stuff was
it was just
out
easier
the door.
As a business person. I wanted it out onto the next one.
I would you don't want to, suddenly you're looking around, you go, I forgot to ship so-and-so's thing. I forgot to ship this. Just ship it as soon as you're paid for it. It wasn't that uncommon.
Right.
But now...
They want it yesterday.
Yeah, everybody...
Because of Amazon.
Yeah.
They kind of skewed the whole landscape.
Yeah, and it's always... it goes back to can you include shipping for free? Well, in the pinball days, that's not like throwing a piece of paper in a priority mail envelope. That involved crating and freighting and, $150 to $300 freight charges to get stuff shipped out,
I remember free shipping was a thing that I tried for a while. I even tried free international shipping, and it kind of worked. We built a little bit into the price, but I was able to find happy mediums and so forth. So I was aware that free shipping was a thing long before Amazon was around.
Yep.
But there were so many variables in there.
Yeah.
It depended on whether your box ended up being dim-weighted or not based upon measurements, and you just never really kind of knew.
Right. Well, there was always that, and, it was easy enough back in the day that we could say, okay, this box weighs 20 pounds, this is the shipping charge. But then when you go to insure it, that 20-pound box might be worth $5 or it might be worth $5,000. And there's a big difference in that insurance charge on there.
Yeah.
So suddenly, your shipping that was normally $20 is suddenly, it's $175.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole the whole thing ended up being, how much risk, how much exposure am I willing to risk there?
Right.
Do I want to spend? Do I want to cover the extra $30 for the extra insurance, or can I take the risk it's going to be just fine?
That it'll be fine.
Yeah, and it's
Yes.
like you just really, it's and those are the things about entrepreneurship. I mean, you have to have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I got nervous just a couple of weeks ago. Grading is a big thing these days for comic books.
Yeah.
There's a company down in Sarasota, Florida, called CGC, and they are kind of like the premier. If you're going to have something graded, CGC is the one that you typically want to go to for comic books.
Okay.
They're the known one that has, the best typical legit grading on stuff.
they're the most credible.
Yes, exactly. So, I had acquired some very early Spider-Man comics, like in the issue number 2 through 10-ish range.
Right.
And I shipped them down there, and the value of the package was around $10,000
Mm-hmm.
of comics that you don't normally find very often.
Mm-hmm.
I was a nervous wreck.
I bet.
I mean, yeah, they were insured, but getting the insurance money and actually being able to find those items again, it had been a while since I had shipped anything where I was constantly checking the tracking, going, where are they at? Making sure, it didn't suddenly disappear from the tracking system.
Yeah, it's funny you said that, because I was thinking earlier today, if I go forward on some retail stuff and I enter an arrangement where I'll be insuring things for different amounts,
Mm-hmm.
how cavalier I was 4 or 5, 6 years into my business about just shipping, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $8,000 items, putting some insurance on some and some on not, and just going about my day, and not overly worrying about every little thing. And I'm not really sure, am I still wired like that? I'm not sure that I am.
Yeah.
I'm a different person 8 years in. I don't know if I'm wired that way anymore. We're gonna maybe find out. But yeah. I mean, and those are tough decisions for entrepreneurs, especially young ones.
Sure.
I mean, early on with me, I remember shipping was a big thing because I found it really easy in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
UPS was wonderful to deal with.
Yeah.
Then this company called DHL came and visited me early on and gave me unbelievable rates.
They wanted all of our business.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to compete
and
with
they were willing
UPS.
and the rates were like really insane. So then all of a sudden UPS, you negotiate too? I didn't know that. Those are just part of the tapestry of learning and becoming a better entrepreneur. But the shipping thing is interesting. There's risk involved, and it's interesting.
Yeah, and
it's your level of tolerance.
I hate to say it, not everybody out there is honest. I mean, if you're working at a shipping company and you see a box this big roll through that says it's worth $10,000, I mean, how hard is it for something like that to just disappear?
Yeah, so what's changed in society? Because I never... I'll tell you how crazy it was, Dave. We used to ship boxes out that had Gibson's logo all over. Because I was a big kind of like used Gibson dealer when I first started, and and Gibson, as insane as this is, Gibson loved putting fancy logos on their corrugated boxes, which makes no bloody sense whatsoever.
It identifies it immediately as
still doing
this
it.
Is worth a lot of
picture
money.
of Orville on there. I mean, I think they're still doing it.
Yeah.
But whereas when I worked with Washburn, there was some boxes that went out that said U.S. music, but it was rare that it would label it as a guitar.
Right.
But to me, I would rather ship the thing out with no identifying marks at all. It just makes more business sense to me. Yeah. But I look back at it now like it wasn't shipping was not a detriment to considering doing business. Where I look at it now, it's
I agree.
Bigger risk, I think, now.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people, even back when you and I were shipping stuff, because, I mean, I dabbled in the guitar stuff for a while, too, and doing, a lot of guys just wouldn't ship internationally.
I love that.
They're like, oh, it's too much of a hassle. I'm like, what, filling out the paperwork?
Man. And I did it all online eventually. You ended up doing it online.
Yeah, you put the person's name in for the address and all that stuff, and it put it all in the right place on the customs. It wasn't like you had to have some special customs degree.
Isn't that interesting? Because, yes, by being willing to adopt international shipping early on, it was a differentiation. I can't pronounce that word.
Yeah,
it was that thing. It separated Boogie Street to a degree from a lot of other people competing with me because I would do what they wouldn't do.
Yeah,
and I used to say it's really not that hard. And my international customers really wanted the stuff sometimes way more than my domestic customers did.
Exactly. And back to the whole shipping and whether to insure it and not insure it. Honestly, I only had one experience out of the stuff that I've shipped. I shipped a Flying V to Greece, which disappeared somewhere. And after about 6 months, the shipper finally cut me a check for that piece. It wasn't quite all that the piece was worth, but, at least I got something back out of it other than a, oh, well, so sad, too bad, so sad type of thing.
Tell people that story. I think of all the thousands of guitars that we sold and shipped directly from Boogie Street. I only had one claim ever, and it was just this real sparkly GMP guitar. It was a Les Paul copy. I'll never forget it. It had an American flag with sparkles.
Yeah.
And I just happened to be shipping it to a customer down south, and the headstock was cracked, and UPS was like Johnny on the spot. I had it fully insured, and within 2 weeks, I had my check.
I paid for it.
Yeah, I mean, it was never an issue, but I can see how today, there's some trepidation. I can't imagine society was more honest then.
I can't imagine it was any different. Yeah.
No. But
you probably just heard about less things.
Yeah, that's probably the case
because of the lack of social media.
Yeah, I think so. But Amazon's kind of certainly spoiled humanity in the immediacy of things. I mean, and so I'm going to be very interested to see how, if we go forward, like what's going to be the expectations, because I'm going to hold firm to my normal path of full disclosure and all that stuff, but I'm not going to be killing myself to ship same day. Next day, but not same day.
Today, not only would you have to, ship same day, but you'll need your Boogie Street van to deliver it and take a picture of it on their porch. And be sure to include a hat.
Oh my God, a t-shirt. That was where the days, brother.
Yes.
Buddy, I really appreciate you doing this.
Sure.
Had a great time, man.
Yeah.
And you'll be back. We'll do some other panel shows and bring you into the full
lots
friend
to talk
series.
about.
We do. We have some ideas as well too. But your friendship means a lot to me, and I would be remiss not sending an incredible shout out to your beautiful mother. She's always been so kind to me, and since I started this project, she has been like my biggest fan.
She's a frequent reposter.
She is, and she spreads the word. So Mrs. B, thank you. We love you, and I really appreciate all of you. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Big Bang Comics and Collectibles in Sewickley. And how can they reach you besides the website? What's your preferred method of conversation? Whether is it coming through social media? Is Facebook big for you?
Stop in at the shop. Yeah,
Big Bang Comics and Collectibles
we'll
in
chat.
Sewickley. Go see the man, Dave Bishop, ladies and gentlemen. We are out.
Peace.
Peace.